Welcome to Newsclick. We have with us Professor Vikas Rawal, a noted economist. He would be talking to us about the current agrarian crisis and the ways the government can address this. Welcome to Newsclick, sir. Sir, there have been recent protests by the farmers, and the recent being in Sikar, where the farmers completely jammed the whole district. So what do you think is why the farmers are doing these agitations? And you are also written about this recently.
You see, one important issue that the farmers have been raising, farmers had raised it earlier in Maharashtra, but farmers have actually been raising it all over the country, is the fact that returns from agriculture, the incomes of farmers from agriculture have been very low. This is a problem that farmers have been facing for a while. But this problem has become very intense over the last 3 years, particularly after the BJP came to power. This problem has intensified, and that is really, I think, one of the most important reasons why farmers have been agitated.
Yeah, but don't you think the government said that it will double the farmers' income by 2020 or something?
Well, that was indeed in the manifesto of BJP, but BJP has obviously not done anything about it since it came to power. Now, you see, the returns that a farmer gets from agriculture, very simply depends on three things. It depends on the price that the farmer gets for the crop, it depends on the productivity of the crop, and it depends on the cost that the farmer incurs in the process of production. Okay. Now, on none of these three things, things have gone all right. If you look at the data, you find that the minimum support prices, the increase in minimum support prices has slowed down. If you look at, for example, wheat and rice, you see over the last 3 years under the Modi government, the minimum support price of common variety of paddy has increased by only about 4.7% per annum. In contrast, you see over UPA 1, it increased by about 15%. And over UPA 2 by about 7%. So there is a progressive decline in the rate of growth, and that has really been very slow. It's in fact have been almost stagnant if you take into account inflation. The similar numbers you see for wheat, and in fact for some of the other crops it's actually worse. Okay, so the big problem insofar as prices are concerned is that during the last 3 years, the minimum support prices have stagnated. If you look at the productivity, now productivity has been stagnant. Okay, one, because you had 2 successive years of drought. Okay, as soon as this new government was formed, there were 2 successive years of drought. Government did very little to actually help farmers cope with the drought. As a result, there were large-scale crop failures and so on. So productivity really declined. Okay, the second thing that has happened is that the government has really cut down on funding of agricultural research, extension, education. If you look at the budgets of the Department of Agricultural Research and Education, it's been stagnant for last 7-8 years, in fact. And if you account for inflation and the rises in salary costs and so on, there's actually been a decline in the funds that are available for research. When you talk of costs to farmers, there are some costs that farmers actually pays from the pocket. Okay, so these are paid out costs. So you have to buy seeds, you have to buy fertilizer, you have to buy diesel and so on and so forth. You have to pay wages of workers. These are things that you have to pay from your pocket. In addition, there are costs that a farmer incurs in terms of his own time, his own labor, his own resources, his own machinery and so on. So these are cost of own resources. Okay. Now, there has been an increase in both, but primarily actually a substantial increase in paid out cost. And in fact, you find that a lot of farmers in the country now, that is in a given year, a substantial proportion of farmers actually incur losses even over paid out cost. So that is, if you start with 10,000 rupees in the pocket, at the end of the season you don't even have 10,000 rupees in the pocket. Something like 15 to 20% of paid out cost is actually fuel. So it's a fairly substantial amount of money that goes into one head. Okay, now fuel costs have risen directly over the last 3 years because of increases in excise that the government collects on diesel. About something like 13-14% of diesel is consumed in agriculture for running the pump sets, for tractors, for threshers and all kinds of machinery. Okay, now you basically, now this simply means that on one hand you are not increasing the minimum support prices, but on the other hand you are actually directly imposing taxes.
Right. So you also mentioned that the investment or the allocations for the government-run agriculture universities has actually been stagnant. And how does it affect the farmers? Is there an effect on the farmers?
Absolutely. I mean, the decline in expenditure simply means that you can't do any research. You can't come up with new varieties. You can't come up with solutions, and you've basically now left all the sort of technical advice to either seed companies and pesticide companies and their agents. So you have the input suppliers to whom the farmer has to turn when there is say a pest attack or a disease or something. You have to basically go to a pesticide dealer and say, what do I do? Or you have some Ramdev who's now advising on using Gaumutra for everything or something. Okay, so you've basically moved away from science-based solutions to problems of farmers to completely regressive ways of doing things.
So not only the farmers who grow food grains, but also farmers who are into horticulture and grow vegetables and fruits. You see when there is a peak season that you see them leave the produce in the market or dump them in the roads, or even the cost of picking them is so high they leave them on the farms. So can you throw some light on how we can address that issue?
You see, the thing is that the whole system of procurement at the moment basically works only for wheat and rice.
Right.
Okay, and in a slightly different way, say for sugarcane, where sugar has to be delivered to sugar mills. Okay, for all other crops, farmers are left to vagaries of open market. Okay, so it's really in the open market that the prices are determined. So the whole sort of problem of imperfections in local markets, problems of demand and supply, and of monopoly control of some traders and so on result in the situation that prices tend to fluctuate a lot. Now, government has not been procuring a whole range of crops for which MSP is announced. Government needs to have a way of procuring them, has to have a way of sort of intervening in the market by announcing some kind of a minimum support price, procuring these commodities. But government right now doesn't even have that. It's not even on the table. It's not, government doesn't have any infrastructure, government doesn't have any sort of institutional setup through which such procurement could take place.
But internationally, are there any models that you can suggest for our country to actually look at so that the farmers can benefit if the local distribution is picked up?
There is one case that I know of where a substantial amount of fruits and vegetables are procured by the government, which is in Brazil, where procurement of local fruits and vegetables, a decentralized procurement of fruits and vegetables, milk, eggs, is tied to the school meals program. Okay. So you basically have like a midday meal program, a massive midday meal program, which is not just giving food grains and wheat and rice and so on, but is also including vegetables and fruits which are locally procured.
So you had mentioned about nutrition being important, and pulses, actually most of the people, their energy or the proteins come from the pulses. But if you see in the past few years, the pulses prices have risen. What might be the reason, and what? Yeah.
The global economy of pulses is really dependent on Indian consumption. I mean, it is really the growth of demand from India that drives the global economy of production, global economy of pulses. Now, pulses are an important sort of segment in Indian agriculture, because that's one segment where our import dependence has increased. We don't produce we are not self-sufficient in production of pulses. We import pulses from Canada, from Australia, from Myanmar, from Africa, from many African countries. So, we are dependent on imports. one major reason for why we have not been self-dependent in pulse production is because pulses are produced by some of the poorest farmers in India. It's mainly rain-fed production, and let's say technological advance in the area of pulses has been slow in coming. Okay. But there have been important technological advances in the recent years. I think an important problem is that the government does not have infrastructure for procurement, okay. does not intervene in the market, has not systematically worked to provide incentives to farmers, okay. Which has meant that pulse production actually is associated with very low levels of incomes in India. Okay. So farmers who have no other possibility grow pulses.
That means a shift in the government policy actually is determining the choices the people of this country
of
make.
course it does. Of course it does. I mean, and certainly the government policy is not helping in correcting the problems of diets, but is actually perhaps worsening it.
You had seen Professor Vikas Rawal talk to us how the negligence of the farming sector by the government is actually helping only the big monopoly seed companies or even the big manufacturers of pesticides by neglecting or underfunding government institutions, and also it's having a direct bearing on our health. If you see, because of the government policies, people from protein based food are moving to substitute their food, are moving towards carbohydrates. In the long run, you know what are the lifestyle diseases that we incur through these change of lifestyle and food. And more on this we'll have with Professor Vikas Rawal. Thank you for watching Newsclick. Do subscribe to Newsclick.